U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan says he's coming to Portland as President Trump continues his crackdown on sanctuary cities. Will we see federal troops or the National Guard patrolling the streets of Portland? And what do the cops in Portland feel about that? Sergeant Aaron Schmautz is president of the Portland Police Association, representing close to 800 members of the Portland Police Bureau. Sergeant Schmautz, welcome back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
It's been a while.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Before we talk about possible federal troops, let's talk about something locally. The issue of public safety kind of ramped up this week after a recent stabbing outside the Central Library, and that followed a fatal shooting there in July. So this week, 3 people were arrested. Multnomah County Chair released a video leading up to the incident. We see that right there. Are these incidents aberrations, or is this an indication of conditions downtown from your viewpoint?
Sure. You know, I think the real difficulty in downtown Portland right now, and in Portland in general, is we have incidents of violence, and we want to make sure law enforcement can be visible both to respond to and prevent, but then also respond and investigate. What's been frustrating from me and from my members' perspective is a lot of times these conversations turn into very political conversations about how we police, not can we or should we or how do we implant law enforcement into community to build relationship. I do think that I think the FBI statistics recently said that Portland is the second most dangerous city as it relates to crime victims. We've got to make sure that we're policing our city well and getting help where it's needed.
President Trump again said that he's sending the military to Portland, or considering it, in the wake of the demonstrations and arrests at the ICE facility, which you're familiar with, of course. He's called it the destruction of the city. You heard some of this, but let's play some of what the president is saying.
Sure.
What they've done to that place is it's like living in hell. If we go to Portland, we're going to wipe them out. They're going to be gone, and they're going to be gone fast. They won't even stand the fight.
Well, Mayor Wilson calls those kind of statements overreach when it comes to our reputation. What do you say about that?
It is really critical that local law enforcement can police our cities. I think the federal government has a role in many different things. That's why we have a federal government. But Portlanders, expect to understand and know the police who are coming to police them. We are seeing, these ongoing protests are difficult from the standpoint that they have impact on the local community. We've seen lawsuits and other things surrounding the police response. So I think it's just really, really critical that we come together as a community, talk about how we want to navigate both public discourse about federal events, but also ensure that we're not harming our citizens and our brothers and sisters who live next to us as we're navigating these conversations.
What would you think if the decision is made to send federal troops into Portland?
So I think, it's important that the city government has a conversation about what we need. Right now, we have a very understaffed police department. We need to make sure that Portland police can police Portland. As to whether or not we need help, I would hope that the federal government would come to the Portland Police Bureau and ask where we need help. If we need help, then that should be a joint conversation as opposed to 2 different groups trying to do different work, which will create conflict.
We've got some experience with this. There were federal troops that were, or federal agents that were sent in 2020 during the demonstrations that we had in downtown Portland after the George Floyd killing. So what was that experience like?
So the real difficulty in 2020 is we were given orders by City Council not to communicate with the federal response at all. And as a result, we were not able to understand what was happening and ensure that we weren't overlapping or even conflicting in our response. The reality is that the vast majority of the impact from 2020 was on Portland, and then you also had the footprint of a federal building. They have a legal right to defend their federal building and do their federal work. Partnership does not mean that we agree with everything, but it certainly does mean that we got to work together and ensure that we're delivering safety for Portlanders. That's our job. That's our focus.
Portland City Council just awarded a record $3.75 million to the family of a man named Emmanuel Clark. He was a 30-year-old black man shot by a Portland police officer in 2022. He died 2 days after that shooting. A grand jury cleared the officer, but the officer's actions were questioned internally. Were there any changes within the Bureau since that incident, and what do you think about the settlement?
Sure. I thought about this a lot, Ken. Certainly our rifle program has continued to evolve. Deadly force has a huge impact on community and on the officers. It was very painful to listen to this settlement conversation from the standpoint that I felt like it became hyper-political and really dehumanizing to my members. I wrote down, because I wanted to make sure I didn't misquote, Councilor Jamie Dunphy said that this incident was done in a way that dehumanized everyone. And he continued to say that this officer was patted on the back and given an attaboy, that this and dozens of other officers who are just willfully hunting people in Portland. And I think that Councilor Green was correct in using the analogy of open warfare. My members go out and respond, and at this time in history, we're responding to record violence in our city. It is really, really hard to be a police officer in Portland, and I think we need to be very, very careful about dehumanizing the men and women who go out and serve their communities. We should have hard conversations about policy. The council president said in this hearing that she's not concerned about discipline. She wants to make sure our policies are right, and I think that's what leadership looks like, not castigating the men and the women of the Portland Police Bureau.
Yeah, we've only got a couple minutes left, but since you mentioned this, we do have a new city council. 6 of them have formed kind of a coalition, a bloc that they call Peacock, or the Progressive Caucus. Coincidentally, they voted to take a couple $1 million out of the police budget. So how is that relationship with this new council and the mayor?
Sure. You know, the mayor is very focused on his desire to navigate the biggest issue we're facing as a city, and we're still seeing that work its way through. I think that is a noble goal, and we'll see how that goes. The relationship with council has been very difficult. I think what's interesting in this ranked choice voting setup is that the caucus that you spoke about has openly discussed the fact that they feel that their mandate is to make policy for the people that voted for them, which in this setting is 25% of the city. I think the city government's responsibility is to make sure they're representing the views of all of Portland, but also making decisions that help all of Portland, and that means making difficult choices sometimes. So it has been difficult to figure out what the policy proclivities are as it relates to law enforcement and public safety. We saw within some texts that were released that there was a conversation of police versus parks, which was kind of a straw man conversation, because the reality was it was never about pitting two groups together. It was about defunding law enforcement. So it's been difficult.
Well, Sergeant Aaron Schmautz, thank you very much for coming back on Eye on Northwest Politics. We've got a lot more to talk about, but we'll bring you back sometime and we'll talk about those issues soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ken.